All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Takedown Breakdown here on the SHIPIT Nation YouTube station. Going to break down all things Week 10 from the main winners, GPPs. Had some members, had some big days over at SHIPIT Nation. Going to look at Giant Squid's Millie Maker win, another one for him. So congrats to him. Just lots of good stuff going on. Guy D-Dry was up in the mix in the Millie Maker. We'll talk about a little bit of his unfortunate run out, but got my guy Nades here with me as always. Before I bring him in, just want to say Happy Veterans Day to everybody out there, and thank you for your service. Thank you to those that have served, support others that serve, everything that goes with that, of course. Thank you. And then Happy Remembrance Day to my Canadian side of the world as well. All the same things, of course, there. Nades, bring you in, man. What's going on?
Not much. Yeah, happy Veterans Day to all the men and women out there that have served the country. Definitely appreciate that. Everyone who's involved with that. Couldn't have said it better myself. So we appreciate that, and can't do what we do every day without you guys out there. So appreciate that. And overall, okay Sunday, better than the last couple of weeks for sure. Obviously, if you didn't have on a low scoring week, if you don't have the 30 pointers, you're pretty much stone dead. Right. When it's not high scoring, I mean, we're talking 167 points, right? Was like the cash line last week, the week before that. And I mean, that's what shipping Millie Makers. So anytime you have a week like this, right. And you kind of could see it going in, right. With the value, right. When Adonai Mitchell is the best projected value with Joe Flacco, Joe Picco, whatever you want to say, right out there. You just know it's going to be kind of a lower scoring week when these running backs have historically been in the kind of the low 6K range. We're up in the high 7K, low 8K range, right? So DraftKings kind of bumped those running back prices up, and the rest of the value was pretty weak. So you could kind of see it, overall the slate was kind of shaping up to be kind of a lower scoring week, but obviously you still need to put the puzzle pieces together and get that. And I mean, if you didn't have Bijan, you didn't have Brock Purdy, you're pretty much drawn stone dead from shipping anything. So.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot about it too, because I think the biggest thing going into yesterday's slate was obviously how tough the pricing was, how hard it was to make good lineups. We knew someone like Mitchell was going to get pumped up. We knew the 2 tight end builds where people could play a Henry or something like that to make it work there. And again, not everything worked out, but just saying that was how the slate shaped up really from the start. And I think that was kind of the key, right? If you knew that was the case, you got to sort of look for putting those 30-point plays in there that you think can get to that. And then just take as many as you can get along the way, mixing some correlation, looking at some leverage. We'll cover that. I think 2 other comments I'll make right out of the gate is, one, it felt like it was easy to hit 80 to 100. It was very hard to break 130 and then get up over that 150 plus barrier. We'll talk about the people that did, of course, but like Sean Hobson says, that's what this is all about. Can't wait to live vicariously through the winners, because my lineups were a bone-chilling winter freeze. I know that was the case for some. I had a couple close calls as well. The second thing I'll say is just what kept happening yesterday, and it's funny, when you get to Giant Squid's winner later, I think it's the best example of it. Everyone was complaining about the chalk this guy, the chalk that guy, the chalk. 85% of the field ain't playing them, and there was actual chalk plays there, and a lot of them busted. So just little things like that you got to look at. It's it's not who you play, it's how you play them. We beat that one to death. It's a good point though, and you'll see it when we get to these winning lineups. There's that you could still find ways around that and be able to make good lineups that ended up putting yourself in a position to be able to win these tournaments. And good players were up top yesterday, winning these tournaments, all of that and such. So keep that in mind as you go through it as well. Nate, any extra tidbits or points you want to add on there with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, I think it's just anytime you get a slate like yesterday, I found myself kind of for a minute, right, when I was kind of first opened up the slate and looked at it, right, and was kind of playing around with teams, finding myself trying to make these really sporadic value plays work, just because it wasn't easy to build teams. And then I kind of took a step back and I was like, wait a minute, why am I trying to force these random punt receivers? Oh, what if it's this guy? What if it's that guy, right, to make these teams? How can I make that a little bit differently and just kind of rearrange, whether it's using 2 tight ends? Because we talk about it, right? these tight ends are priced like wide receiver 2s and 3s, and a lot of times they're wide receiver 1s and 2s in their respective offenses, right, with injuries and things like that. So that's one way to do it, right? But I mean, it was pretty tough, and obviously you saw a lot of sharp players win a lot of money yesterday because of that, because they just know you don't have to make the diamond and the roughs work on slates like this. You just have to overall change your roster construction and not jam in all the studs that typically, right, the stars and scrubs builds that we've had the last couple of weeks. So I found myself, and I'm sure a lot of people out there in the chat kind of found themselves when you're kind of hand plug in or virtually hand building like I do myself, that you took a look back at your team once you kind of put it together, and you're like, what's the likelihood of 3 of these guys getting there right at the same time just to make these studs work? Right. So I think that was a big call out yesterday. And obviously you'll see some of that when we go through some of these teams.
Yeah, and you're allowed to build a balanced build, right? It's the funny that's like it's in the PGA DFS streets. You always talk about that. Like people are going stars and scrubs. Like you're allowed to use the mid-range. You're allowed to do whatever you want. That's the beauty of this game. So I think if that's what you were struggling with yesterday, and you'll see when we get to the Millie Maker winner, obviously that was something. This one certainly hurt. I had another run-in with the Nashville live final seat yesterday. I had the second highest owned Taysom Hill in the tournament. I came 5th. The guy in front of me only had me by like 0.5. And I also had Devontae Adams. And so this would have had me way up in second. And then I just needed Devontae Adams to do anything, who also didn't do anything down the stretch. But another 5th place, made a little bit of cash that way. But, still chasing, still getting after it. We got plenty of time. Today is November 11th. It's 11/11. People like to make a wish at that time sometimes. And then also, the qualifier tonight, the 490Q, so I'm going to speak it into existence, is the 128th qualifier. My birthday is January 28th, so it's 11/11, 128. We're going to try and make this baby happen. I'm always thinking about the little things, Nades, but shout out to the crew. Got Sean here, always looking to learn, go collect. Michael Ortiz, Juice, Will Levis's boy. He said he's coming alive, boys. It just didn't work out yesterday. Sean's there talking about JT and Najee. Just talked about the Taysom Hill, and the new ones is in here. And yeah, the MBS one, that we clipped it. We threw it in our Discord. Hoop was getting a lot of flack for that, but honestly, he's only ever taken dust and turned it to gold. So kind of want to say, you got to be a little bit easy on our guy Hoop. It's a fun bit, but he's turned Najee into, a beautiful play. He's turned Dak Prescott into a, $250K winner. He's done a lot of good when it comes to that. But Nades, let's move on. Let's get to the perfect lineup and have a look. And funny enough, Kyler Murray, opposite side of the other one that people are calling dust now, is the Aaron Rodgers stuff. It was Kyler Murray on that side, but you got Murray 49.9, 214. So this is how you could have done it. But Valdez-Scantling pumps it up. You will see though, Eagles, Connor, Kelsey, Ridley, Purcell, like a lot of these other guys did show up. Not really White or Valdez-Scantling, but a lot of these other guys did still show up. Give me your thoughts on the perfect lineup. Anything you see here?
Yeah, so the Kyler thing, right, when everybody, right, was kind of in that quarterback tier, kind of going with guys like obviously Brock Purdy, right, who still did get there, but Sam Darnold, right, was another guy in that kind of range. And not only that, on the opposite side, right, of the Aaron Rodgers stuff that everybody was trying to make work too in that same game, pairing him with the James Conner. We've talked about that a lot last year, Tambo, right? Just kind of soaking up the entire red zone, right, on a team, right, with a guy like James Conner, who is also heavily involved in the passing game, right, that quarterback running back stack. And obviously we at Shiptimizer, we have settings and stuff that you can make that work to get teams like this, right, where you just kind of soak up that whole thing. Not only that, right, a guy like Trey McBride, a guy like Marvin Harrison are super expensive on a week where there's no value, right? So taking that value, quote unquote, running back, right, you can make it work. And then plugging in the good plays around it. I mean, the Rashad Wright play, right, when everyone was trying to play Kate Otten, right, at 5,500, going up $400 to a guy like Rashad White on that offense. Also, outside of all the Sterling Shepherds, right, who obviously had late news there, and the McMillans and those guys work, just go on the play that has been heavily involved even in the passing game, right, on that team. So you could have got to a similar type team. Obviously, nobody was really getting to a Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and you'll see he wasn't obviously needed. Everyone thought the slate was over in the first time window when a 3,900 dude that's less than 1% owned goes off and drops 30 points. You kind of just laugh at that, right? You chalk it up, you make a fun bit out of Hoop and things like that. But you knew realistically even if you had them in your lineup, it was usually tied to a Derek Carr, or is it tied to the opposite side, right? The Kirk Cousins type stacks, and those were dead, right? So even if you had the fancy screenshot right out there, people on Twitter and things like that touting, I played Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Congratulations, you struck lightning in a bottle. But guess what? Your lineup probably still didn't make anything because of that. So that's another thing too, is just like when you know a dude, especially at that ownership in a slate, when it's the first time slot, it's the first half of these games, and he goes off for 2 touchdowns. He's under 1% owned. He's not needed to win any sort of contest. Obviously, he's going to find the perfect lineup, right? When a 3,900 dude drops 30, right? But you're not playing to be perfect. You're playing to win tournaments, right? So, I mean, that's the one thing I had.
214. I love that rant because I'm going to run off it for a second too. But 214 versus 178 was a rock star score and won the Millie yesterday. So I do want to have that conversation quick, and then I got some good ones in the chat I want to bring up, and then we'll go on to the Millie Maker winner. And we've got plenty of reviews coming up. We've got members. Nades, you had a nice lineup there. We'll go through that. A couple people hit me up on X, posted theirs. We'll show it all off and more. Our guy Dirty Chic won the $140K on $600 yesterday, so congrats to him. I know his stepbrother, he helped him out as well, so that was just awesome to see. But just to say, the Valdes-Scantling thing, I know a lot of people knew it was a bit and that it's funny, but I also think there was tons of people that thought life was over and like we didn't get to him. We made a huge mistake. What ends up happening on the winning lineup? This is a hard one to explain and get across and help people understand, I would say, but just a little bit from my experience, at least playing a long time. Your end result of your winning lineup, when you win a GPP, if you win a GPP, or when you get up there and have a nice sweat, whatever it might be, is a result of what you put on your team. You built it. That's what's on the team. It got to the winners, the top winner circle, whatever you want to call it, and you're good to go. But it's what the rest of the field is doing. That's why people can win at random sports that everyone's like, I don't know anything. He doesn't know anything about NASCAR. How does he win? He doesn't know anything about NHL. How does he win? She, they don't need to. They have to know about DFS. Marquez Valdes-Scantling was 0.4% owned. Your screenshot was most likely worth 0 because you had nothing else right with it. And even on a 200,000 person field, you don't get bonus points for calling one play. You need to put all 9 together. So congrats, and there's all other stuff that goes with it. It's not shitting on people that played him. It's saying the reason nobody cares about that and it doesn't matter as much is because out of 200,000 people, 900 teams had him. Do you know how many of those teams are garbage right out of the gate? They're built poorly. They have other bad plays in them. Think about the people that are making the decision to play that, and then you're going to count on one good result to say that they're sharp because of that? No, the rest of their lineup is probably trash, and so you shouldn't actually be that scared of something like that. You should be way more worried if a play like Aaron Jones gets 40 and you're way underweight, or you didn't play the chalk that he was in a good spot. And again, he busted. I'm just saying, my point being, that's what should worry you, not a guy that's 0.4% on the slate. And he literally had to have it. It was on three catches that he got it done. So it's like, again, you got to think about all those factors going into it. That would be the one there. All right. Couple other things just to look at. Like, yeah, it's narrow. It doesn't matter though. Like it got you there. It didn't even, by the way, one lineup in the top 10 of the entire Millie Maker, and it was 5th place. Beyond that, it was like 12th, 20th. Like it's not likely that it's going to get there because that it's one play. You need a whole lineup to get there. It's the guy that, sits around the table and tells you about his betting parlay. He bets 12 gamers, 12 legs every day, and always hits 9 of them. Like, always hits 7, and 5 of them were so close though. It's nothing. It's worth the same thing. 0. Shaloub, my boy, this was brutal, right? It was annoying because it kind of interjected on the Sterling Shepard stuff. First of all, 41 versus 4,200. Thought you had a good value play. Kind of just stuck with it. Projections still like with Shepard, so I stayed with it, and I thought about it, and maybe they still use him. I will say, this Baker team with the Bucks team, whatever you want to put the name on it, of what they do now, running back, tight end, running back, tight end. It's been that way since these injuries. I will say, though, you posted in the Discord about a 100K late swap, and I've certainly had that happen before. I spoke about it on this very show. I would just say, like, what's your normal process, and was this it? Because that's the only way you can really be unhappy about it and strongly feel that way moving forward. Obviously, it sucks missing out on 6 figures. I'm just saying, just got to think about it from that perspective. Why did you swap? Did you need to swap? Like McConkey or Ridley, I don't even know. Like, you'd have to know more about the field you were in, if you thought you were blocked, if you thought it was a better projection. But if you did what you always do, don't be worried about it. If you did something you never do, you could stress a little bit more about it and feel that way, I think. But yeah, I don't see much else here, Nades. Let's keep it moving. I think it's just part of that process. But back to this one here, it was a solid score on that build. Let's break it down. So I don't know Giant Squid that well. I've had the opportunity to meet him a few times at live finals. Always great dude, very polite, does his thing over at SaberSim and everything there. Awesome win for him. Another Millie Maker win, but this is the lineup, and congrats to him. I thought this was a good example of a lot of the things we talked about, Nades. Very balanced, right? Didn't just say I have to play two tight ends to get a cheap Hunter Henry. And obviously he has a whole portfolio of lineups, but this is the one that escaped it and got to the top. But no Mitchell, no Matt Collins, no real anything, right? And willing to play a combo pack of the Noah Brown and Eckler. We've seen that work out. Had the Calvin Ridley, had the stack still, didn't need to run it back, right? Didn't need to bring somebody back from the Tampa side and try and figure out that situation. So kick it to you, Nades, but I thought the one that came through out of his bunch certainly was a pretty good lineup here and used up 49.9, had some leverage pieces in it, but I'll kick it to you. Your thoughts on the winning lineup here from Giant Squid.
Yeah, I like this build a lot. The Juwan Jennings play, right, with no Ayuk there, they've shown to love Juwan Jennings. He's also in that mid tier, right? If you were going to Purdy and you wanted to stack him with Kittle, because you couldn't get up right with the value. We talked about it already. You couldn't get up to a CMC. Debo made the stack a little bit tighter, right? Because at his price point, even though I thought he was a good value. I know you thought he was a good value at the price point for the slate. It still made it hard to double stack Purdy when you got Juwan Jennings, wide receiver 2, who's kind of in that 5K range, and then Kittle's a spend up tight end where people wanted to kind of get value from the tight end spot. It just made it tough to stack it and double stack it with Debo. So going to Juwan there, that's kind of can play that Ayuk right possession type role. Same with Kittle, who's also been smashing right as of late. Thought that was an interesting way to double stack Purdy. Obviously that was good. Playing the Eckler play, I'm surprised. I'm shocked by Eckler's ownership yesterday. I loved Eckler. The reason I loved Eckler is no matter what the game script was, he's involved, right? He's a great pass catcher out of the backfield. They have Chris Rodriguez is kind of their other guy, right, in there that is kind of the quote unquote running back, right, that they want to pound. But they've been shown, right, when Brian Robinson isn't in there, if they're trying to run, it's going to be Jaden Daniels usually kind of keeping it, and then they're kind of just filtering in Rodriguez right here and there. I love the Eckler play. He was one of the best values on the slate yesterday. I was shocked at his ownership was held in check. Obviously, there was a ton of good running back plays yesterday, but I was really shocked at that. So playing that, you didn't really need to correlate him. It was just kind of a one-off. Throw it in there, get your value from him. You didn't need anything on the Pittsburgh side. Obviously, the Eckler Pickens kind of mini stack there, but comboing it with a Noah Brown, right? Kind of the possession guy there, who's also in that same range, right? 4,300, a little bit more expensive than the Adonai Mitchells, but right in that same range of the McMillans, the Sterling Shepherds of the world, right? So I like that kind of combo pack. Hey, no matter what the game script environment is, Noah Brown still there, the possession guy. So I like that kind of stack there. And then just plugging it in with kind of the good plays, right? Like Calvin Ridley, who since DeAndre Hopkins has been gone in that offense, he's wide receiver 1 at sub 6K in a game script where you're expecting them to be trailing the entire game. Yeah, it's Will Levis. Yeah, it's that, but it's literally a trailing game script against Chargers defense, right? Who is going to be pretty popular as well as the spend up. Everybody was trying to make the Herbert stuff work and things like that. So I think overall it's leveraged pretty good, right? The New England defense on the other side of the Browns or the Bears defense, right? You're also leveraging because you ain't got DeAndre Swift, right? You don't have a Swift in this lineup. You don't have the Bears. So why not play the opposite defense of the chalk? We've seen this work. It feels like every single week, right? You talk about a Tambo, the opposite defense of the defense that everybody wants to spend down, right? Defense is such a high variant onesie position, right? Look at the first play of the game yesterday in that Bills game, right? Pick 6 to start the game, right? Instantly. So you're kind of minted. So overall, I think it was leveraged really good. The James Conner play, just as a leverage piece off of that entire Jets team. When people were going to that team, they were kind of playing Connor, but his ownership even got held in check because of all the other running backs, right? So playing it when you don't have any of the Jets guys, right? The Breece Halls, the Devontae Adams, the Garrett Wilsons, the Aaron Rodgers, just playing, hey, maybe Arizona just kind of blows them, smashes them, and it's James Conner. So overall, I think it was built really well. You had your leverage plays built in there, right? Like the Ridley, the James Conner sub 10% guys, who are definitely involved in their respective teams. And it's not kind of throwing darts at the wall. Oh, I need to find Marquez Valdez-Scantling, right? Or this dude that's going to get 3 snaps and maybe he catches a 60-yard touchdown, right? You still got guys in good spots, environments, and good game environments that are respective to help them score fantasy points.
Yeah, I got a few things real quick because, a lot of thoughts in my head right now, and I'll pull up something in a minute because the chat was asking about it also. But just to note, like the first one off the top, and I talked a little bit about this on the Mayo show on Friday, a little bit on the Sunday show with Hoop and Title yesterday, but I think people continuously forget this same point that I want to make. We literally just talked about it last week on this show, how the previous week's Millie Maker winner had said he had 50% Tyreek Hill and went out to walk the dog because he assumed his day was over, and later on he wins. When you're building, and if you have one lineup, I get it. We talk a lot about MME, and I understand that. I think that's a common thread. I'll show the launch announcement in a second for my project coming up, and I think a lot of the questions I got are, a lot of the content is tailored to MME. Can we talk some more 1 to 3 max? And we'll work on that. But I will say just quickly, if you're here, we're often talking about portfolios. Even if it's a 20 max portfolio, it doesn't matter. It's how you're handling. If you're a 3 max portfolio, how you're handling your 3 lineups. There's so many things to talk about. And the one thing I'll say is when you're building your lineups, you're building for them to go that way. Like if you're building with CMC, you're expecting him to play in full. Let's say the announcement didn't come out yesterday. I talked this with Mayo on Friday. We were putting CMC in saying we expect if he's playing in full. If he doesn't play in full, if he gets re-injured, or if something else happens, clearly those lineups are dead, but I've got other lineups built in different ways for other scenarios happening. And I think that comes into play here huge because just at the defense alone you talked about, 3 of the best defenses yesterday were New England going up against the chalkiest D, Chicago on the slate, and one of the chalkier running backs in the value range. Again, he didn't get that high, but just to say, I don't know what DeAndre Swift's final ownership was, but he had to be up there a little bit. So
he was the fourth highest owned. So the Bears defense was the 3rd highest owned player in the entire Millie Maker for the $20. Swift was the 4th highest behind Aaron Jones and Hopkins. So there were 3 and 4. Is the chalkiest plays on the entire slate.
So there's New England D. Don't care if they got to 12%, almost 90% of the field. 88's not playing them. The second one, Jacksonville Jaguars. They did quite well, I think, against Darnold seeing ghosts out there. Who was the highest owned running back on the slate?
Aaron Jones, highest owned player on the entire slate overall.
Bang. The third one, and everyone's going to say it's results oriented. We don't know what happens until today. We don't know until last night when it ends and when we review it today. So remember, we're using the results to explain a concept that you may or may not already get. That's okay. That's what it's about, trying to learn and get better and focus on it. The last one I was going to say is Tennessee, right? What was it? Was it the Titans or sorry, who was the other one that crushed yesterday? Oh, Buffalo. Sorry, the Bills. Who were everybody on was? Adonai Mitchell, highest little value guy. Josh Downs, other one. Even Flacco builds, who I was in on too. So people have to remember, when I'm building my Flacco builds, I'm not doing that. But when I'm looking at it, these are 3 defenses. Everyone's going to point to the results. No, that's just a great way to use this as an explanatory piece to let you know why I'm explaining this. It's the defenses. Nobody thinks they're amazing or anything like that. This is the whole point. They don't have to be. Most people looking at the game log say there's no way I'm playing everyone against them. I'm going to onslaught against them. I'm going to play multiple of these guys. And some of those still got there. You'll see in the winning lineups where certain combinations still got there of, where was it here? I thought I saw, let me see. Was it the next one? Right here. Look at this. 3rd place in the Millie for 50K. Still got there with Mitchell, Flacco, Pierce. I mean, you can still have good scores with it. Just saying to explain that theory of, some of that stuff you're just using against the field on purpose because it's the fastest way to leverage up the board. That's how you got to think about that stuff. So I wanted to bring that up. The other thing, quick nades, I'll just bring it up on the stone. People asking about like value plays and stuff. We had a lot of it here. Like McNichols is the other guy. If people are worried about Rodriguez and Nichols, though, that's just like a combo pack of Deshaun Tucker the week that he got there. Clearly, if you're worried about that, you're saying this must be a pretty damn good spot if I'm so worried that the other dudes are going to come in and get scores too. $5,800, no Brian Robinson. The snaps were a little bit split the week before, but it was also, I think Eckler went out, came back, so little things like that. But at $5,800 on a slate where you're starved for value, 13.3% to be optimal. He came in at like 15. It's fine. Noah Brown, another guy, came in really solid here, 10%. Pickens, 9.5%. Ridley, almost 9%. Quentin Johnston scored a touchdown, almost 9. Like, it doesn't mean it's all going to work. It's just, again, to show it off that some of these plays that are popping up made a lot of sense because of that. So we had you all covered there. And I guess lastly, Nades, then I'll kick it back to you. This is results oriented, but it fits with what I just talked about with the defenses and with the Christian McCaffrey thing. If you're build for what you're building for what you want to happen, and then putting game theory, correlation, and leverage into the build. But results oriented is that, yes, the high end backs did not get there. The Barclays of the world, the CMCs, the Camaras, not really, because you had Bijan on the opposite side. But on a slate where you were starved for value and you had Connor at 1,100 less than Breece Hall, who didn't get there. 5,800 for Eckler, we just talked about. 7,700 instead of 81 on the opposite side of Kamara. You could have made cases that it is in the opposite lineups of doing this, that, again, I have my CMC builds, the rest of my portfolio I'm talking about. If CMC doesn't get there, that's one guy that I'm knocking off. If Barkley doesn't get there because there is Hurts, Brown, Smith, even Goddard back, by the way, and they're fully healthy, well, maybe that's the case. You had balanced guys that you could put in here. Jonathan Taylor, all that. So the fact that he got, Noah Brown, Jennings, Ridley, instead of going to the 3K guys, went cheap at D, mid-range everywhere else. That's the type of builds that got to the top yesterday. This is just the result of one that got to the very top. I
got one more thing too, because I think it plays good into this. Obviously, I'm sure he had 150 teams in here and built his portfolio through an optimizer, right? Through Sabre. Obviously Sabre, but here's the thing: running back position, right? Aaron Jones was projected to be the chalk. Who was projected to be the second highest owned running back on the slate? Bijan Robinson. However, why did Bijan Robinson not come in is the second highest owned running back? Because the news broke about CMC, right? CMC was $8K, $300 cheaper than Bijan, or $300 more expensive than Bijan. If you're not playing CMC, right, why not play the passing side? But not only that, who was else right there? Alvin Kamara, 8,100. So Bijan, you knew ownership was getting pulled from a guy like Bijan Robinson, right, to a Kamara. You knew ownership was being pulled from a guy like Kamara to CMC, which in turn, why not just play the guy who is projected to be the highest owned running back on the slate behind Aaron Jones, right, when you knew ownership was getting pulled away from him at that. So that's also leverage baked in right there, because you're not going to play. I mean, you could have played CMC in an onslaught build like this, but when you're building for this, you're hoping, hey, I'm playing the guy in that range, right, to eat everyone else's lunch. And then I'm hoping Purdy does it through the air to also eat CMC. So that's another baked in leverage piece there. And I think important to kind of look at when news like that breaks. It's always everybody wants to make the make the shiny new toy, right, work. And yeah, could you say it's result oriented, but the good value plays are the highest projected owned guys are in those spots for a reason early on in the week when people are building their teams, right? And then you just know everybody wants to pivot. It's the same thing in late news and NBA and other sports, right? Everybody wants to jump on the other guys. The other guys were projected to be good plays for a reason, right? This new news doesn't just make those guys bad plays in turn, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind, right, on why Bijan kind of came in under what he was projected at. You got to look at kind of the entire slate.
And speaking true to my word, just on what you said of the MME down to single entry, I think that's the whole point. Whatever your portfolio is, you should be thinking of that. If you build out your portfolio in MME and you're loving CMC on this slate, you're playing 30%, you say, screw this, I want to be first in on him, I'm playing that. Well, that's 30% of your 100% portfolio. So I hope you've got some Purdy stacks without CMC, with CMC, whatever, because if you really think he's going to smash, it means you think the 49ers are going to smash. Like, that's just what your lineups are. You're telling your optimizer to make it that way, or you're thinking it's going to go that way, or you're trusting the projections to say it's going to happen that way. Build the secondary piece, the level, into your portfolio. Talk about building in sets. That's another way. Maybe you build 20 lineups where you're locking CMC around different quarterbacks, and then you're building 10 lineups with CMC with Purdy, and then you're building a bunch of lineups with Purdy, no CMC. Like, you can do it like that example, and that trickles down. If you got 20 max, you got to make that decision. Play lighter, play tighter. I always say that means you're probably just tightening up what you're doing there. Maybe you're getting some more overweight stances. You're not spreading it out as much. You're saying, I've got this tight portfolio, this 20 lineups out of a bigger player pool that, a bigger field of entries. Maybe I'm just going to, go this way. And single entry should be the same. If you're not playing CMC, just using him as the example only here, but if you're not playing CMC, do you think the 49ers still smash? Well, then it's probably a Purdy stack. If you're like, you know what? I think those 49ers are going to spread it out a ton. Now that CMC's back, they got him. They got Debo. They got Purcell. They got Kittle. They got all this. I think it's going to be different, and I'm going to go away from that game. Then you be comfortable with that in your single entry and move to the next best spot and start there. But that's why sometimes when I do the show with Mayo on Fridays, and we've switched the format up, and I think it's better now, but just to use this example of anybody who watches both, I used to give him a lot of shit in the other format because we'll get a starting point, and then it's just like free for all, I should say, of like, let's just go everywhere. Why? We have to tell a story, especially if you only have one lineup. I'm here. Now I'm thinking about here. I definitely don't want to leave that out, though, because it's in the back of my mind. And that's what sort of tells your build story and why I say things like when you land on New England, well, you're not high on Swift. You don't care about the Bears D, clearly. Why wouldn't you just go to the New England spot? Oh, you got a little bit more money? Oh, you happen to land on Buffalo? Well, you decided you didn't want the Adonai Mitchell or the Josh Downs playing. You're not playing Taylor. Why not just play this? Goes up against all those guys naturally. And you don't know that it's going to get you 19 fantasy points in defense. It's just the result of you landed there because you cared way more about what's in your single entry outside of the Indianapolis Colts stuff. So why not be okay with landing there, using that as a 2v2 to make something bump up in your lineup? Who cares? You don't know what's going to work out or not, but it makes sense. That's the key I would add there. So lastly, just quick nades, and then we'll go to the dirty Chic here. Pickens, Taylor. So Chief keeps bringing this stuff up, and it's good stuff to bring up, but we got his lineup up I'm going to check out later on. But just to say, remember last week, not this past week, the week before, everyone's, the Gesicki got there late. This touchdown happened at the end. Sometimes all the stuff hits. I hope some people weren't watching it. I guess, we didn't hit on that quickly. Just go, shout out to our guy D-Dry. I'll go there in a second. But Kincaid, wide open touchdown overthrown. Hopkins, wide open touchdown. Who else? There was other guys. It's yesterday. Talked about the variance.
Devontae Adams dropped a touchdown in the end zone. Right. I got
deflected slightly, and I'm only protecting myself because I really needed that. But there was a slight deflection. But you're right. It was a one he definitely could have had. There was somebody else who had a walk in and turned too quickly with it. I forget what team that was on. And then who else? Hopkins, the other guy. There was somebody. Oh, Jonathan Taylor was the best running back on the slate from 20 to 20. And once he got inside the 20-yard line, he couldn't do a damn thing and couldn't get there. So, yeah, lots of variance the opposite way this week around, but that would have changed the slate up quite a bit because a lot of these were the most popular owned plays that would have mattered a lot more than the Valdez-Scantling just breaking the slate, who didn't even, like I say, no. The first Valdez-Scantling lineup is a Derek Carr lineup, and I guess going back to it, this is a good topic, Nades. I'll flip it to you, but I don't think it's a bad lineup. Again, not results oriented. Obviously made 15. No one's going to say that, but just to say, so Carr, Kamara, Valdez-Scantling, that makes sense. Fits into an overstack. Quentin Johnston, fine. There's nothing wrong with this lineup. I would say it's probably fine. I think the next one was in 12th. Carr, Valdez-Scantling, Bijan, Rashad White. Like these are the types of lineups I'm saying, though. This guy is good for him. But you're wanting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, basically 6 diamond in the roughs to happen and random things to go your way. Yes, that's kind of what you need to win a Millie Maker. But just going back up here, 15, 15, 15, 15, 19, 9, 12, 8, 3. You just don't need to do that. And this is one of the best players in the world at DFS. So it was Downs. Yeah, it was Downs. Thank you, Marlon. You're the man. That's what it was. It was pissing me off because I knew some Flacco stacks and that one and the Mitchell stuff and just everything. I know everyone got mad too because Diami Brown was another one. Everyone thought it was Noah Brown, though, for the Commanders. And Brown. It was good news. It wasn't the Brown you were wanting it to be. But anything else, Nades, on that before we move on? D-Dry I was going to talk about quick, but anything else you want to add?
Yeah, DJ, right? Everyone last week, Gesicki and that getting there late, right? And I mean, it's all part of the game, right? Well, guess who won a lot of money for a lot of people yesterday is Calvin Ridley, who caught a touchdown in literally the closing time when the game was over, right? Literally had, they had no chance to win the game. And obviously you're going to keep passing, right? You're not going to concede and give up and that, but it goes both ways, right? So just remember, it's not over till it's over, right? Same thing, right? I myself was tilting, right? Algier, kind of getting 3. I mean, you have the best running back literally in football in the last 4 weeks, guys incredible, absolutely incredible inside the red zone. And you're running Algier out there to run up the middle 3 times in a row, right? And then Bijan obviously comes in and gets the touchdown. I was tilting it. Many people were tilting it. It wasn't results oriented. It was just more of a process thing for the coach. But in hindsight, I mean, if you weren't high on Bijan, you probably shouldn't have been tilting that. I mean, even though it was kind of ridiculous, because I mean, if you don't have Bijan, you weren't winning any money yesterday, right? So on a low scoring slate, when a guy gets 30, you need him, right? So in hindsight, a lot of people probably tilted Bijan that actually probably ended up hurting them, or tilted Algier that probably ended up actually hurting them. And they probably wish Algier probably would have scored, right? Because Bijan wouldn't have been quite as needed, right, without that touchdown. So it's just little things like that you just don't know, right, at the time.
But it's the perfect spot, because that is the exact thing I was saying earlier about the MVS thing. You should almost be tilting this guy getting a touchdown more than the MVS thing happening. This one hurts you a lot. Like remember what I just showed you? All the lineups have Bijan. I mean, you need him. That's just how it goes. And he's owned enough. He's in tons of lineups. He's in tons of combinations. If you're underweight on that should bother you a lot more than a 0.4% guy breaking the slate. It's like, if he shows up in any of those lineups, again, 1 in the top 10, and it's a game over stack where you still need, 1%, 4%, 1%, 7%. I mean, it's fine. It's just, I'm saying you need a lot to go your way, and the balanced approach ended up working yesterday. But D-Dry got a little bit hosed at the end, because even after the Ridley touchdown, he was still sitting in second for 100K. And we bring him up because if you're new to the show, or if you're a member and you haven't watched it yet, or joined this year, whatever it might be, if you go under videos on this exact YouTube channel, you're on it now on a live show. But if you go under videos, you can see the interview we did with D-Dry last year. Just watch the first 20 minutes of it. He won the Millie Maker, and it was awesome. And this is another close call, but the Philly D got him twice. Here, 2 lineups had the Philly D that got there late against the Trey Lance, before Trey Lance, etc., coming in. And that's part of the game. That's what you got to fade down the stretch. I know there was a ton of people on the opposite side of that had Hurts, had A.J. Brown, or Devontae Smith, or Goddard, whatever it might be, that got no playing time because the game's over and they're just going to sit those guys, of course. So little things like that go both ways, but I thought I would bring that up. Let's move on. Let's go to our guy, the Dirty Chic. Congrats again to him. Huge day. He got second in the $150 3 max, the power sweep. His stepbrother got first in that. And then he got first in this, and he had to sweat a lot down the stretch too, right? If you had guys behind him, like what was he going up against? I think Murray ended up sitting, right? McBride, all those guys. Connor barely played the fourth quarter just because that score in that game. So he was anti-sweating as well up top, but this was his lineup, Nades. He had Purdy, the Brock Purdy stack with Brock Purdy and Ricky Pearsall, as well as George Kittle, double tight end. No Eckler, but played Zach Ertz at no ownership, got a few points in there. Had the secondary stack of Hunt and Cortland Sutton. Then he had the Ridley versus the Chargers D. He wanted me to rip that, I think, a little bit, but I don't know. It's a $5,700 receiver you can kind of get there with, I guess. But other than that, I'll let you take it over from there, man. What do you see with this one?
Yeah, so I'll bring up the Chargers D and Ridley thing. I mean, number one, right, you're going to be unique when you're playing a guy like that. But not only that, right, what are you playing the defense for? You're playing the defense to not shut out the other team, right, because that's just highly unlikely. You're playing them to score like a pick six, right, or a fumble to the house or something in turn, which kind of helps a guy like Calvin Ridley, who's the number one pass catcher on the other side coming back. So, I mean, it's not as negatively correlated as people think, right? Are you probably going in there and doing it a lot with the highest priced defense, right, playing kind of higher priced receiver? Probably not a bunch, but realistically, I mean, I don't think that's the craziest play. It's not like you're going in and playing like a Saquon Barkley, right, against the defense where if he's smashing, right, it's likely that there's not very many chances for a pick six, because if he's smashing, they're not really throwing the ball, right? So it's a little bit different. That's one thing there. The Kareem Hunt play with the Cortland Sutton kind of mini stack, right? Who was else? I mean, people were playing Kelsey. People are playing that. So, I mean, you're a little bit cheaper than Kelsey going to a guy like Sutton, who you could have played there. And then Kareem Hunt is also leverage in that running backs area where people are playing Aaron Jones, right? For $100 cheaper, you jump to a Kareem Hunt who's leveraging Kelsey. He's leveraging Aaron Jones. And then in turn, you're playing the secondary stack. Hunt gets it going on the ground. That's kind of a gross game, right? It's also leverage off of the hashtag Never Mahomes, who people were saying was going to break the slate yesterday for the first time ever. I know Tambo was pretty strong about that on our show right here. I mean, I think he's 0 for 87 now in Millimaker winners with Patrick Mahomes. So you just a ton of leverage play with Kareem Hunt there at the position. So overall, like that, talk about the Brock Purdy Kittle stack with Ricky Pearsall, right? Ricky Pearsall was a good play. He was heavily involved last week in that offense. He was also a value play on the slate when they're still shorthanded, right? Ricky Pearsall, it's him and Juwan Jennings, right? They don't have Brandon Ayuk, right? And they love 3 wide receivers. They have all season long, right? So playing him in kind of that value tier where people are trying to make McMillan, Shepard, things like that work, right? Going to like that when he's tied to your stack, I think makes a lot of sense. So overall, really good build. And there's a lot of leverage built in that probably most people don't look at, like the Kareem Hunt play, right? That leverages a ton of stuff in that range. And it's still not crazy. I mean, Kareem Hunt's been a beast for this Kansas City offense.
Yeah, it's like you said, when you're going to go to this stack and you're not playing that, it was the prime example of what you've talked about, and a bunch of people got to this, but not playing CMC, so why not go the Purdy stack and then put someone like Bijan opposite of Kamara? You talk about not playing the Mahomes stacks. I mean, play Bo Nix on the other side, did just as good. So, I mean, literally, it's never going to happen. It doesn't happen. Just stop doing it. Stop trying it. It doesn't work. Kareem Hunt would have been leverage to also the DeAndre Hopkins play that everybody was on. The secondary stack with that is going to be unique either way. So that's just a nice way. And I think you've got that when we get to your lineup review later. Weren't the 49ers on a bye too? Wasn't that the other thing? They waited till off the bye.
Yeah, coming off a bye. Yeah, but the Sutton is a direct leverage right off of Hopkins. So you're not only leveraging Hopkins with Kareem Hunt, you're also going to the other side of that game, correlating Kareem Hunt, who Sutton is right there, right? 50 within a couple $100 of the highest owned play on the entire slate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know they talk about these rookie receivers off of a bye. Sometimes you'll get them more involved, and he had been involved even before that. So that was a good point. If you're not playing Eckler or Noah Brown or something like that, 2 tight ends set this way made sense because your second tight end literally went in with Purdy just fine. So, I mean, this is a great lineup. I think this one is a key factor as well. The thing is, you don't want to play it against your quarterback, and it's even then you can. We've seen it work with like the Jameis Winston stuff back in the day and all that. In Shiptimizer, we have it so you can literally just turn it off, allow it versus a defense, and play it against the flex if you want. A lot of people will turn that off, but you can turn it on. The key to remember is this. It's not showdown. There's 10 games here. The chance of being duped is so unlikely. It's unless you're playing literally the chalkiest of chalk lineups with the exact 50K max with all that, like 2v2s, things like that, common, 3v3s, etc. Sure. But you're not doing it to not be duped. Like it doesn't matter. That's why there's 2 factors to it. One, you don't need to do this to be unique. But 2, it doesn't really matter because it's like you said, against just a receiver like this, they could get 2 pick sixes, and that just means they're down 14-0, and then Ridley gets more opportunity that way, or could. Do you set it up that way on purpose? No, you don't have to. There's 19 other defenses you can play on the slate, especially that's literally true when this is the most expensive. There was 19 cheaper defenses and 19 other defenses on this slate that he could have played. It didn't really matter either way, but it's just another note. Like, why not just play for me? Like in my stuff, I'm probably just going to have Minnesota there, or I'm going to have something else. I don't know. My point would just be there was a ton of different ways that you could have seen it happen. He could have had Adonai Mitchell at 3,800 here. He could have moved the 5,800 up to tight end instead of Zach Ertz, played $5,800 Eckler, and then had the $3,600 Chiefs to go with the Kareem Hunt play. And boom, you've got a correlated lineup that still wins and has all the pieces. I'm just spitballing it, but I just see that stuff with a
Ertz
lot of.
Is also a pivot off of Hunter Henry, right? $100 cheaper than Hunter Henry, right? Who I know burned a lot of lineups yesterday, right? With his goose egg or whatever he scored, right? 2.4 points. So that's another thing too. There's a lot of leverage built in right there. I like a lot.
All right, let's see if you like this a lot. It's your lineup. So let's talk to people through your build here, because it's a lot of the people that did have builds, like new ones, those guys. I'll get to as many as I can, but they have Purdy builds. So talk to me about your Joe Flacco build. And again, it's not about winners and what won. It's why did you build it this way? How were you thinking about your build as you went through it? I think that's what helps the people most. 2 tight end build too, by the way. Shout out to the chat earlier. Taysom Hill certainly hurt some feelings. Myself,
Taysom Hill and Downs, right? It could have been a really fun day, right? Downs dropped the walk-in touchdowns. Taysom Hill got called back, but hey, that's the game we play. I just like this build a lot. I was in on Buffalo Indy game a lot. I had in my 5 teams, 3 out of my 5 teams came from this game. Right, kind of how I break my portfolio down. I usually, if I'm using a couple quarterbacks, right, I usually grab them from the same team, right? So I had 2 Josh Allen builds, 1 Flacco build, and then the other 2 lineups were obviously correlated together as well. So I really like that. I thought it was a little different way to play the Adonai Mitchell, Josh Downs stuff, as you can see, right? If people were playing them, it was more so being played as secondary stacks or with like a Josh Allen, right? Because you needed the salary to get up to a Josh Allen there. Obviously, I had those teams, but going to the other side of that, with a guy like Flacco, who is at home, he knows going to chuck the ball a ton. Obviously, had a couple of mistakes there, but I loved the McCaffrey play. I had a bunch of McCaffrey in the other spots. I didn't have McCaffrey. Obviously, I went Brock Purdy there. So just kind of overall that. The reason I played the 2 tight end build this way is I look at Taysom Hill as more like a leverage off of Kamara, right? And being used as a Swiss Army knife as a running back, basically. So that's kind of why I played Taysom Hill in the flex there. But also, hey, I correlated him. Bijan's getting it done on the ground, just going to smash, right? I don't want the pass catchers. I want a guy that's going to be able to make plays. And also, I don't have the salary to get up to a guy like Kamara. So Bijan's leveraging the Kamara ownership. I went to a secondary stack and used that in Taysom Hill. So I like that. And then I really like the secondary stack with McCaffrey and Otten. I mean, you said it. Tampa Bay's offense has ran literally through 2 guys, Rashad White and Cade Otten, since all these guys got hurt. You know it's going to be a competitive game. Tampa Bay is at home. Otten can just get all the checkdowns and all those catches. Obviously, didn't work out there. And McCaffrey, obviously, I mean, he came back and literally was heavily involved in that offense and just obviously didn't make some plays. I mean, he got all the snaps, got all the work, had over 100 all-purpose yards, things like that. And then the Eagles defense, it was just kind of a one-off spot, right? I didn't want to play the chalkier defenses up there. I know it's Cooper Rush, right? The Eagles defense has been really good the last couple of weeks. So kind of just fit the team, but obviously, could have been a lot better, but that's kind of how I thought about it. Leverage built in, right? With the guys like Taysom Hill, leverage off Kamara. If I'm not playing Kamara, going to Bijan, right? Correlating it together there. So overall, thought it was a pretty good build and could have been really fun. But
yeah, it makes perfect sense of how you explained it. Like you said, also too, if you're playing for if McCaffrey does this and you're not on Purdy stacks and so on and so forth. The other thing I'll just say, because people might see it and see what we always talk about, like I like if you're going to play these 2 highly owned wide receivers, let's melt into that with 3% owned Joe Flacco. Let's first of all make it make sense and really eat into that ownership. Also, then people will say, okay, but you didn't have a lot of leverage built into the lineup because you only really had Flacco low owned and Eagles low owned. But what I would say again is how many people are using 3 wide receiver spots on this? How many people are paying up for 2 running backs and setting it up that way versus having one of those Ecklers or, again, guys that did even better in some cases, but guys like James Conner and some of that mid-range options that way. So I think the build is fine. It just didn't fully work out. You talked about how Downs and Taysom could have got there. The other thing I'll say, though, is on a slate like yesterday, we didn't know what the final scores needed were going to be. That would be the cheat code. But I will say, yeah, that's a good one, Paul. We'll get there in a second. But the other thing I was going to say is just, when you're building for upside, and that's like what you're doing, you're just trying to find as many spots as you can. McCaffrey can break a slate. Bijan did break a slate and certainly can. We know that. Really, the funny thing earlier, too, was with that Algier stuff. Scott Hanson pronounced, 4th time's the charm for Atlanta. Yeah, technically, but it was first time the charm for the guy they actually should have jammed it with and might only taken one try and not had to get to that out. The other thing is Otten makes sense with him and has been involved and can get you 20-plus points. Taysom Hill, and you played him with Mitchell, but when you're looking at that Hunter Henry, $3,800, like how many of those guys are getting wildcat snaps and could throw a touchdown, let alone have all those injuries associated with their side? So at ownership, fine, but at least you found a way to use them that made sense. And then Eagles D, who were a leverage piece, just to note it though, how come nobody wanted these guys? We know what Cooper Rush is. We knew what he was capable of not doing however you want to put it. And that was a big factor. So, I mean, not wanting the Eagles there, who people have liked all season, at a perfect price point too, a little bit more, but a lot less than the big dogs. So I thought that was good. Paul had a good one there, said apparently there is Sun in Dallas that can help your defense. Don't know if the Sun mattered for Cooper Rush, Trey Lance, and Co. and all those guys, but it definitely is a factor. It's weird that they have that, and it's always seems to be something you're watching those games later in the day. Overall, though, Nades, I thought a pretty good build. Just wanted to bring that up. So let's go to, where was the other one I wanted to talk about? A lot of them are similar. I'm not going to just breeze through them for no reason, but Wombat had here a Purdy, Pearsall, Kittle, Otten. Best way to use the double tight end. I talked about it. You know, two of the three things that came true. I mean, for the first look show, and shout out to our guy, Degenerate75, another good week for him. Could have been a lot better too, but just, you know, we talked a lot about this Kittle and Otten double stack. I know he wasn't as high on it to start the week, but he came around to it just because the way the value, that nothing popped up for value. So it made perfect sense. We said New England would win, was the +6.5. We circled on the notes list. That came true. Not only did the +6.5 come through, but they won. And then yesterday I talked a lot about the Pittsburgh off a bye, just the way Mike Tomlin's been able to get that job done and against rookie quarterbacks, and that came through. But solid build. Used the Denver, Kansas City flip here, so that was fine. I think this is a great build, not because of the results, just in general. Chiefs, who was in the chat here earlier, had a bunch of stuff mixed in. Let's do this one real quick, Nades, because it was Purdy, Pearsall, the Kittle, double tight end. New England went with, instead. So he did have Kamara, Pickens, Noah Brown. So I guess, nothing wrong with this lineup at all. He leveraged a bunch of different spots. Kind of just didn't work out. But do you have any thoughts on this one?
No, overall, I think it's a pretty solid build. Obviously, Hunter Henry's been heavily involved in that offense there, and it's a good play. I mean, I think if I'm playing double tight end when I'm going to a guy like Kittle, I personally, I liked, if I was playing double tight end yesterday, to use them in like a correlated stack, like a Otten, right, into Kittle, or like a Taysom Hill, who's like a Swiss Army knife, versus a guy that strictly is kind of reliant on touchdown passes right there in Henry. So, I mean, that's probably the only other thing there that I got a little take on. But outside of that, I mean, I think it's a pretty good build. The Pickens, Noah Brown kind of stack there. I don't mind that. I like the Jonathan Taylor play in the lineups where I wasn't in on the Flacco stuff. I was playing Jonathan Taylor. I'm usually on the opposite side of my Josh Allen stuff. I just knew people weren't getting to him. And like you said, right, I mean, he could have been a Bijan Robinson yesterday. He should have had 2 touchdowns, right? So overall, it just didn't get there. But I like the build in general.
Yeah, certainly. I know he's watching these shows every week. We've already hit him up in the chat a few times, and he's learning lots. But just I would say, cutting into the Purdy ownership with Pearsall, for example, doing the 2 tight end set. It's fine that he landed on Henry. I know people say, okay, could have been Bijan with Taysom and would have got a bunch more points. Sure. But I think 2 things. One, you're not playing CMC, so $100 more, and you're getting Kamara, who, by the way, you knew his ownership was coming down from the original 28 or 25 plus that people were talking. It wasn't a huge break, but it was
Kamara dropped about an 80-yard touchdown too, by the way.
That as well. He was the other guy earlier. I think somebody brought it up here as well, Brother Numsy. So, you're not playing the Mitchell down stuff. Why not play Taylor? That could have been a bigger day. I like the secondary stack here because you're not playing Eckler, or you're not playing Ertz or anything on the Washington side. But if you want a piece of that game, the way to get it was something like this. So I'm fine with that. Using the 2 tight end, but in the stack, and then just going to Henry as the one-off with the Cowboys. I think, what do you got here? 2, 3, 4 good leverage pieces in there that obviously you could have finagled it a little bit different. Like you could have got away with a chalkier defense here, or dropping down and maybe pumping up one more position. I would have been fine with that. But I think overall, solid build, right? You can always look back in hindsight. I think that was a good one. Looked at Wombat. Who else do we got here? Newens 1. Newens had Purdy, Jennings. I don't know. He had $200 ticket that he won. He got the 2 indie guys in, but they're 2 high-priced ones. Bijan, no run back. Dobbins, I get it. It was a little bit more all over the place, but did have the secondary of like Taylor, Downs, Hollins. I don't love the build personally, but I guess I'll kick it to you. Just some stuff that I would like. These are 2 really high-priced guys for them to ceiling out is possible for sure. But I would have rather this be Mitchell with Taylor, because then even if he doesn't do as much, Taylor could have made up for it, so on and so forth, and similar ownership, and then you just get more money to spend elsewhere. But he did the flip with Hollins as opposed to him. But I think, yeah, other ways I would have looked at doing it. Your thoughts on this one, Nades?
Yeah, I think obviously congrats for winning the ticket in that. I just think when you're going with high priced guys like a Downs, a Taylor, a Bijan, and a Dobbins, yeah, there's some leverage in there, but you're just setting yourself up thin, right? If Purdy's breaking the slate, it's likely that more than just Juwan Jennings is getting there, right? Realistically, I mean, Juwan, how many times outside of the 1 week, right? The obviously he did it the 1 week, but literally everybody was out. Debo was out, Kittle was out, everybody. It was literally Juwan Jennings was the only standing guy back there. So that's a little thin there. The Mac Hollins, I think I would have liked that more as like a skinny secondary stack. And it's not results oriented. It's just you're using value already yesterday on the slate is weak and thin. When you're using two guys from the same team, right, the Downs and the Taylor, you're kind of hoping that Indy's just going to smash. How realistic is Indy going to smash Buffalo, right? Probably pretty thin. And then the Dobbins, I just think you're kind of over leveraged. And you kind of just left yourself a little thin with some of the plays because of the way you did it. But obviously you got there. I just think the Dobbins play at that price point in that range, I mean, I thought it was probably a little thin there, to be honest, and it's not results oriented. It's just like he's got to beat out, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, who's also a leverage play. So you already have that leverage in that range, right? You don't need to double leverage it, I think, with another spend up running back there, I think. But, I mean, I don't know. I just think it's a little thin with a single stack with Juwan Jennings. So I probably would have liked like a Debo or a Kittle or something like that, right, to double stack that.
Yeah, what's pretty sick about it, I guess I would say, is like, this is the thing, just my takeaways, and it doesn't mean they're all right. Just to say, like, the big one for me is the too expensive guys. Like, if you go back to Squid, and I'm not looking at all his lineups, but like if you go Eckler, Noah Brown, that is nothing. 4,358, and doesn't even have big ownership with it at all. You go back to this, you've got a 20% owned $6,200 dude with a nice leverage play. It's almost like you should be using Taylor against that, or I'm better with like an Adonai Mitchell there, where it's like now I'm looking at it as a cheap combo pack for the cost of 2 under 10K and just hope that they can put you up 30-something points. This is expensive for those two, and it's just weird how it would end up working out, needing almost a perfect storm. And then Jennings stacked with him makes sense. I get what you're doing in New England with the D. Like, all this stuff can make sense and can be told a story on. But like, I would have just preferred putting in Mitchell here, not even the results, just to putting in Mitchell, and then seeing about like whether Jennings goes to Debo. Again, would have done worse. I'm not explaining for the result. Or a Henry up to Kittle to add to the double stack and let Jennings be in there, and then be able to find another running back like an Eckler or something if you need the savings. And then the D got you the points. I'm just talking about an overall construction of the build, right? That's how I would have liked it a little better. If you wanted to do the cheap combo pack of Hollins and Mitchell, where most are looking to pivot one way or the other, you would have got similar ownership, still had Taylor in there to make it different, still had the story of Indy gets there and Buffalo on the way back, or Buffalo gets there first and Indy on the way back, however, and then you would have been able to bump up to like a Kittle, still had room for a really good play at running back and been able to get away with pretty much whoever ownership-wise, and maybe you still stay on or land on the Patriots. So I don't know, just a quick thought. Any final thoughts on the slate, Nades, from you?
No, overall, I think we broke it down pretty good and talked through it. I really like that the Bijan thing, right? I think more people got to kind of pay attention to similar stuff like that, right? Late breaking news, you just know it's going to pull ownership, and it's not because Bijan went out and got 32 points, right? It's because Bijan's been a beast all season, and he was projected to be the mega chalk of the slate. When you get news like that and you have other good plays in that range that people are going to, you just know ownership's going to be held in check. People can only play maximum of 3 running backs in a team, right? So just stuff like that, I think is good. And then it's literally another day ending in Y with the opposite defense of the most chalkiest place on the slate. The results aside, I think that's another good learning for everyone.
Everything we try and take away is all based on the perspective of before the slate started, and then we're looking at it after. That's why we're reviewing it, but trying to give you little nuggets and tidbits that you can take away. And then speaking of tidbits, got to bring this up at the end, but I just posted it. If you can help share it, post it around, let people know. We appreciate it, but it's 1,000 people so far that have hit me back. Hit up 1,000 plus people, 300 plus hit me back. And the first date's out. It's not the main project, but this is the part of it, very the beginning, the piece of the puzzle. You see it in there, but excited for this. So guys, check it out, tambostidbits.com. That's going to do it for this one. For Nades, for myself, ToeTagginTambo. Let's ship it.